protected us and this country and do protect us even this day. Now, not always have wars been fought on foreign soil. Too often they have come back around, or not always have they been fought on foreign soil. And when we come back around to survey the damage, what we see left is total ruin. Pearl Harbor. And many of those who will be honored as veterans have experienced the depths of the ruins, coming full circle to ask the questions, or ask the question, why? Why us? Why them? Why her or him? Why not me? Why is this called a victory? As I opened the lectionary reading for today, I was immediately drawn to the Old Testament reading from Haggai. The only reading in the 3-year lectionary cycle from this small 2-chapter book, but the words profoundly impacted me. One of the things that I've been thinking about a lot lately is why me? I mean, why me in this calling? Why me in this place? Why me in this role? Just a lot of why me's. Not because I'm dissatisfied with life or my job necessarily, definitely not with my marriage or my family. In fact, my home life is probably more solid than it has been at any point in time in my past. And not because of anything that has happened to me or my family. If anything, I would ask in those instances, and have, why not me? The why me comes from a place of curiosity over knowing that God has placed me here in this time and in this place for a very distinct purpose. I'm just curious as to why me. You know, and sometimes the why me's are obvious. They're like these neon flashing signs in the median of life, you know. But then there are more often than not, they're just hidden and understated, only obvious after God's glory is revealed. And in that I have to say, isn't God cool? I mean, sometimes we're just convinced that we're in the totally wrong place at the way wrong time, and we couldn't be farther from where God wanted us to be, even if we tried, when all of a sudden, wham. And it's as if God says, nope, you're exactly in the right place at exactly the right time and exactly for God's exact glory to be revealed and not your own. Why me? God. That's why. And we see this with our buddy Haggai. You know, he was one that's known as a lesser prophet, or better stated as maybe a minor prophet. And these minor prophets were the ones who wrote the 12 short books at the end of the Old Testament, starting with Hosea and ending with Malachi. And Haggai prophesied in a period of time where the exiles were returning to the promised land of their ancestors, and the Israelite people had been taken into exile into Babylon for nearly a century. And it was to the returning exiles that God sent Haggai and into Judah to deliver the messages to the war-weary refugees. And Haggai, too, had been in Babylon and was thus among those who were allowed to return back to the promised land. And when Haggai made it to Jerusalem, he was a little disappointed by the way that those who had stayed in the land during the period of exile had treated the temple, and the way that those who had gone before him had been able to return home early had treated the temple. They just paid no attention to rebuilding the temple of God. They were far more concerned about themselves and rebuilding their own lives than they were worried about rebuilding God's house of worship. But how true is that? When we're sitting amongst the ruins, we can almost become consumed with our situation, consumed with our plight, consumed with ourselves, and we forget. And as I reflected on my own life I've discovered that one of the things that has served me so well in my adult life is growing up amongst the ruins. Growing up amongst the ruins. I mean, really, when you come from a home that was as broken as mine was, broken in so many ways that you might not even know what normal looks like, you're constantly trying to find yourself searching for improvement, constantly striving for better, for the ultimate vision of wholeness and restoration. And the other interesting thing that I discovered about life and about God's will for our lives while studying this passage is that we don't have to settle for living in the ruins. We don't have to settle for living in the ruins. And this is a little bit about what the Beth Moore study has been talking about that we've been doing over in Highmore. And we don't have to merely just exist around the rubble. Life can have order. Life can have meaning, and it doesn't have to look like a war zone. Why? Why you? Why me? Why? Because Christ came to seek and to save what was lost. We learned that last week. And after I studied that verse a little bit more in depth, I began to realize that there might be a better translation to that verse. You see, the word save in the NIV translates back into the Greek more accurately restored. More accurately, rebuild. And that word lost literally means, in the Greek, destroyed. To seek and to rebuild what was destroyed. Christ came to seek out and to rebuild what was destroyed. I'm telling you, there have been points and times, both literally and figuratively, in my life that it's been just complete ruins. Literally ash among the wreckage. This is what was left of our house. This is what's left in the Philippines. But you know what? I understand who God is. That He came to rebuild the ruins, to restore what was destroyed, to bring hope amongst the wreckage. I didn't have to stay there. You don't have to live there. We don't have to remain tied to it. Why you? Why me? Why us? Because Christ came to seek and to rebuild what was destroyed. Isn't God good? I find it interesting that Haggai there's just very little known about him, other than what's written in this book and a little snippet in Ezra. And in the time frame in which he prophesied to the Israelite people was a whopping 4 months. Haggai, if it translated from Hebrew, means Lord's messenger. Haggai was not a prophet of gloom and doom, but a prophet of priority. For his message was simple: stop worrying about yourselves. Get the temple rebuilt so you can worship your God. Period. The rest will fall into place. And I'm sure they looked around like many of us do and many of us have, and they said, okay, where do we begin? How do we even start? Where will we rest our heads? We don't even have houses to stay in. How will we survive? But I don't know if you noticed, but there was a word that was repeated over and over again by Haggai as he gives out God's decree. He says, stop, but now be strong. But now be strong, Zerubbabel, declares the Lord. But be strong, Joshua, son of Jehozadak, the high priest. Be strong, all you people of the land, declares the Lord, and work. For I'm with you. This is what I covenanted with you when you came out of Egypt. My spirit remains among you. Do not fear. The NRSV says, yet take courage. courage. Oh, it's a wonderful. Take courage, O Joshua, son of Jehozadak the high priest. Take courage, all you people of the land, for I am with you according to the promise that I made you when you came out of Egypt. My spirit abides among you. Do not fear. What I came to understand is I'm pretty certain that this had much less to do about the physical rebuilding of the temple as it did with the intimate relationship between people, God's people, and God. You see, one of the things that happened when the Israelites were taken into captivity in Babylon is that they slowly but surely lost their religion, lost their faith, lost their identity. They just became submerged into the culture. And they were Jews and they were God's chosen people, but as the generations slipped away, so did their faith and their worship and their relationship with God. Our ability to come into a house of worship is not about the where and the when, it's about the who and the why. Why me? So that I can be strengthened with only the strength that comes from God. Why me? So that I can leave, so that I can have courage to face the enemy that comes before me by the power of God that only comes from my God. Why me? Because there is so much work to be done, and I am the one that God has called for such a time as this. Why us? Because God has called us into a relationship that has the power and the ability to restore all that has been destroyed. That relationship has the ability to raise us up out of the ruins, to fulfill our God-given destinies, to work for it. We have the ability to be strong and courageous. Why? Because God, that's why. And the Spirit that remains not only among us, but in us. We do not have to face any situation with fear or trepidation, because our God has given us the power to overcome it. Because Jesus Christ came to seek and to restore all that was destroyed. You and me, all of us, we have the ability to rise. To rise out of the ash, out of the rubble, out of the ruins.